powered by the
Powered by Perl 5.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nigel Hamilton.
Good evening, everybody. Yes, as Tom said, I'm going to be talking about a weekly dose of Perl 6, but powered by Perl 5. Okay, so I'm just another Perl hacker, and I'd like to learn Perl 6. So that was one of my use cases for why I started embarking on this. I also used to enjoy teaching, so I thought, what a good way I could learn Perl 6, and I could also learn how to teach it again, and that's a good way to learn something, to try and teach it to somebody. And then as a course administrator, it would be good to sort of motivate the students to get through the course, because I should say it's a course that runs over 7 weeks. It's a course by email, and to get your next SixFix, you have to answer a question to get the next SixFix. So, has anyone done it yet? Has anyone signed up to it? No?
I haven't done it yet,
Okay. Hopefully by the end of this talk I'll be sold you on it. And I'm also into lean startups, so I've had my own startups, but I've also worked with other entrepreneurs. So I thought I could use a sort of a lean startup process, methodology to make the system. Although it's not really for money, so it's not about earning, it's actually just about learning. So that's the process. And in the lean startup, they've got this idea of get out of the building. So that means if you've got an idea and you want to actually test it to see if it's got a viable market, you should physically actually get out of the building and try and find a customer who might want your product. So that was a bit tricky because I had to try and find a customer for a Perl 6 fix. I couldn't just go down to Tesco's and barrel an old lady up and say, fancy a SixFix. That's a bit tricky. So yeah, so I thought, okay, next best thing, go into the Perl 6 IRC group and just put the idea out there and see what they've got to say. They're a very friendly group there, so I got some positive feedback and then some more positive feedback later on. But they're saying that, well, not sure about a daily dose, because initially I thought, well, we could do a daily dose of Perl 6. And then I went, not sure about every day. So then I thought, okay, well actually we could do it every week. So in lean startup parlance, that's known as a pivot. So my very first pivot came from getting out of the building and actually just talking to the people that I thought might be interested in it. And so this is what happened next. So I basically created a small web page with a sign-up form, very simple sign-up form. Put your email in there if you want a SixFix, and that's the front end. And as I said, well, it's powered by Perl 5. When I was considering the back end, well, what happens when that email goes in? Last year I was looking at various web service systems, and this is a back end as a service. You might have heard of it, pars.com. Has anybody heard of it? No? Well, it's used by mobile developers. It provides all sorts of things like the ability to send push notifications, send emails, record objects. So it's basically a whole back end. So that if you're a front end developer, you can just rely on this store behind the scenes. So it's pretty good. But in the case of a lean startup, it's actually a little bit too much. There's you can actually do it with less than what they provide. And then what happened earlier this year was that Facebook bought pars.com, and then sadly they shut it down. So at night you might hear the sounds of screams, and these are front-end mobile developers who now have no back-end. So I was glad that I went for a lean option and basically made my own back-end API, which I called the API, Business Engine API. And it's basically modulicious with Postgres SQL. I chose Postgres because they've got excellent support for JSON blobs. So you can have a kind of a hybrid NoSQL database with a relational database. So you can throw a JSON blob into Postgres SQL and it can be indexed. So you can have fast B-tree access to JSON subparts. So that's useful. I put it in Amazon because I wanted to do email sending through their SES service, and I wanted to be able to back up the database and expand it as needed. And I use Majorlicious. So the heart of the API are these simple routes here. We've got users. Those users can have lots of different attributes, just a JSON blob of attributes. There's email, there's the ability to record events. In all startups, the CEO or the founder wants to know, what's happening. They want to know all the different events that the system is doing. So having an event capture system is really important. So this is the back end. So when you type your email into the SixFix thing, actually it gets posted into this API. The other thing is I'm quite into trying to speed up the development loop. So there's also a deploy route on the API so that when you commit to Bitbucket, it fires a hook which hits the deploy route, which then effectively redeploys the app. So please don't hit that route too hard. And actually, there was an interesting discussion earlier about making the client to talk to the API. In making the client, it really does force you to think about, well, actually, what do I want the API to do? And in this case, having it multi-tenanted was important because I wanted to be able to run multiple startups inside this one backend. So SixFix is just one of a number of startups that I'm running through this backend. And that's one of the advantages of having kind of a multi-tenanted system. And then, so when you put your email in, there's a little API, so there's a little web app that sits there, and the controller that fires is this. And you see this is where the client call is made to the Business Engine API, and it just passes your details through, including like an opening score and what question you're currently on. Of course, when you just start, you're on question 0. So that the next question just basically increments that. And because this is stored in a kind of a JSON structure inside the Postgres database, we can just manipulate those values without having to pre-declare a database structure. Okay, so that's the back-end Perl 5 part of it. So now let's move on to the Perl 6 bit. So what is the course about? What are the SixFix? What's the course of 7 weeks cover? Well, I wanted to make it useful, just like maybe when you're at school, you're in metalwork and you made something that you could actually then take home and use. Well, I wanted you to be able to do the SixFix course and actually potentially have something that you could use in your day-to-day work. And for me, the day-to-day work of being in that cycle of code, test, find a bug, code, fix the bug, you're in this sort of loop. And ideally you want to try and get around that loop as quickly as possible. This is kind of an OODA loop, you may have heard of that idea. So a tool that could help you get around that quicker. That's what I was hoping that I could provide in the course. And there's a tool that I use every day. I use probably multiple times per hour, which is this thing called Jump. And basically it looks to just jump around that cycle. So sometimes you want to find something in your code base, massive code base, right, where is the method that does blah? And then you pull out ACK or git grep or AG, which is a Silver Surfer, which is quite fast. And Jump is basically a front end to any of these back-end search services. And all it does is effectively takes the output of these and then it appears like this. So say if I was searching for jump find this sub, it finds all the instances of that and then the line numbers, the file where it occurs. And then when you press on like B or D or whatever, it'll open up your editor at that line. So it just basically gets you around the loop quicker. open your editor and then you're straight in there. And it turns out that actually there's tons of times where at least I find myself wanting to run a Linux command and then jump to the results. So for example, you want to find a file in your area. You could have back-end commands for locate or whatever. Does that make sense? So the SixFix thing basically provides you with a Perl 6 implementation of jump. And the idea is that you create your own subcommands to help you jump around your workflow. I mean, these are two examples that work for me, but of course, in your own workflow, everyone's got different workflow. This is an example of the output for jump to file. So say we wanted to jump to the sign-up PM file, it shows you all the instances of sign-up across the file system, and you can jump quickly to whichever one. And yeah, so I find myself jumping to file listings, log files. Sometimes you find file descriptions in log files and you want to just jump to where is that error happening. Jump to the BBC when you feel like having a break, stuff like that. Okay, so that's what happens, that's what the course is about, that's what the course covers in Perl 6. But if you're not wanting to go into Perl 6, there's a Perl 5 version, and that's available at that Bitbucket address. However, I'm hoping that you go for the Perl 6 version, albeit it'll take you 6 or 7 weeks to get through the process. But if you'd like to do that, you go to sixfix.london.pm, and you'll know what happens when you put your email address in, what's going on behind the scenes. That's it.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. Do we have any questions?
Which one are you using in your day-to-day work, 5 or 6?
Well, actually, I'm contracting a note with Companies House in Cardiff, and I'm using Jump Perl 6 version.